The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long, warm stripes across my kitchen counter. I could smell the rich aroma of coffee brewing, the kind that clung to the air and made everything feel normal. I cradled the mug in my hands, feeling its warmth seep into my fingers, and scrolled through my phone notifications almost absent-mindedly. A few work emails, a message from a friend checking in, and then the usual social media posts, pictures of people celebrating Easter, decorating eggs, laughing with family. My chest tightened a little, a mix of longing and hope. Maybe this year would be different, I thought. Maybe this year they'd actually reach out, and I wouldn't have to guess whether they even remembered me. I hadn't seen my parents in months, not since the holidays, and the silence between us had grown heavier over time. Yet every Easter morning, a small flicker of expectation still lingered, stubborn and persistent. I could almost taste the familiar scent of my mom's cinnamon rolls baking in the oven, see my dad fumbling with the egg dye kit, laughing at his own clumsiness. Those memories felt warm, distant, like looking at an old photograph that had faded. Around the edges, I paused for a moment, staring out the window at the quiet street below. The neighbors' yards were already dotted with pastel decorations and baskets of candy, and I felt the weight of my apartment's stillness. My thoughts drifted inward. I haven't seen them in months. Maybe it's finally time. Maybe this year, things will feel like they used to. A small, nervous smile tugged at my lips as I imagined their surprised faces, the smell of food filling the house, the sound of laughter echoing through the rooms. And yet, there was that tiny, nagging hesitation. A shadow at the edge of hope. That whispered doubt I tried to ignore. Something felt off, though I couldn't put my finger on it. My hand hovered over the phone, thumb ready to dial their number, and I hesitated. The screen glowed in my palm, quiet and patient, like it knew the storm that might follow. Visuals linger on the coffee mug, steam curling into the sunlight. The camera pans over a silent apartment, a messy couch, a stack of unread books, the gentle sway of curtains in the breeze. My phone buzzes again, a small vibration against the counter, pulling me back from my daydreams, reminding me that life outside these four walls was still moving. And for a moment, I let myself believe that today, maybe, things could be normal. Again, that I had just taken a sip of coffee when my phone buzzed again, and this time I noticed something unusual. It wasn't a cheerful text wishing me a happy Easter or a casual check-in. It was an email from my parents. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, expecting maybe a simple greeting, a photo of the house, something that felt like a connection. But the screen lit up with something completely different. A bill. A $100,000 bill. My eyes widened, my breath caught, and I had to set the mug down because my hands were trembling. I stared at the numbers, scrolling up and down to make sure I hadn't misread anything. This has to be a mistake, I whispered to myself, almost laughing to hide the panic. But the email was clear, formal, and utterly unyielding. It was a request, or maybe a demand, for me to pay for their house. My stomach turned, cold and heavy, and I sank into the chair. The quiet hum of my apartment suddenly felt deafening. I could hear the coffee maker ticking away in the background, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and yet everything inside me had gone silent. Flashbacks hit me like punches. Last Easter, the warmth of my mom's arms as she hugged me, my dad's laughter echoing through the living room as I tried to hide a mischievous grin, the smell of roast and fresh bread filling the kitchen. Those moments, so ordinary then, now felt like lies, a cruel setup for something I didn't even know could happen. My fingers hovered over the screen, wanting to call them, wanting to scream, wanting to disappear all at once. That I couldn't even process the betrayal in words. Why? That single thought repeated over and over, bouncing around my mind, refusing to settle. How could the people who were supposed to love me, who had held me and nurtured me, suddenly reduce everything to a financial transaction? My chest felt tight, and my vision blurred for a moment as I leaned back, gripping the chair like it might anchor me in reality. Visually, the camera focuses on the phone screen, zooming slowly into the staggering $100,000 figure. The apartment feels colder now. Shadows stretch longer across the walls. My hands shake as they rest limply on my lap, and the coffee, now forgotten, grows cold. Outside, the sunlight seems harsh, uncaring, highlighting the isolation I suddenly feel. The world continues, oblivious to the upheaval that just landed in my inbox. But I sit frozen, trying to understand what just happened, and more importantly, what it means for me. I paced the small space of my apartment, my mind racing, trying desperately to make sense of what I had just seen. There has to be some mistake, I repeated, almost like saying it enough times would make it true. Maybe they accidentally sent it to me. Maybe it was meant for someone else. The rational part of me clung to every possible explanation, even as a heavier, darker suspicion crept in. But deep down, I knew. I couldn't ignore the gut punch feeling that this was deliberate. That I sank onto the couch, resting my head in my hands. I could almost hear my mom's voice, soft and comforting, from a memory months ago, laughing over some trivial argument, the smell of her perfume mingling with the scent of her baking, and my dad, fumbling with the keys at the front door, grinning. When I rolled my eyes at him, those moments had felt so real, so safe, but now they seemed like they belonged to someone else's life, a life that I wasn't allowed to touch anymore. How had it all gone so wrong without me noticing? The more I thought about it, the more I tried to rationalize their motives. Maybe they were struggling financially, and this was some desperate, misguided attempt to get help. Or maybe, it was punishment, some cryptic way of making me feel small, invisible. And yet, no matter how hard I searched for a reason that could make sense, nothing felt right. Nothing could justify turning love and family into a bill, into a transaction. I stared at the window, watching neighbors prepare for their Easter celebrations. Laughter drifted faintly from a backyard down the street. The contrast between their joy and my disoriented stillness was unbearable. My chest tightened, my thoughts spiraling. Did I ever really matter to them? Every memory now felt tinged with suspicion. Every smile, every hug, every casual "I love you" suddenly carried a weight I couldn't trust. Visually, the camera lingers on the rain streaking the window, or the sunlight cutting sharp lines across my hands as I grip my knees. The apartment feels smaller, almost suffocating, echoing the emptiness I feel inside. My phone lies on the coffee table, inert and mocking, a constant reminder that the connection I hoped for might never come. I wanted to call them, scream, beg for an explanation, but fear and disbelief held me back. I was caught between denial and understanding, rationalization and heartbreak, trying to force reason onto something that defied all logic. After pacing and spiraling for what felt like hours, I finally mustered the courage to reach out. My fingers hovered over the phone, a silent battle waging in my chest between fear and the desperate need for answers. I dialed their number slowly, each press of a button feeling heavier than the last, like I was stepping into a battlefield I didn't want to enter. When they answered, it was just a perfunctory, clipped greeting, the warmth I had imagined for months completely absent. I tried to ask about the bill, to understand what it was and why it had landed in my hands. But the conversation was brief, dismissive, and ended with promises to talk later that I knew in my gut would never come. I sent texts after that, carefully worded, attempting to balance emotion with clarity, pleading for some acknowledgement of what this meant to me. Each message felt like tossing a pebble into a vast ocean. Silence swallowed them immediately, leaving me staring at the screen, waiting for a ripple that never came. The buzzing of my phone now felt mocking rather than comforting. Each lack of response was a hammer blow, hammering home the realization that I had been excluded, not accidentally, not out of oversight, but deliberately. Flashbacks hit me unrelentingly. Small moments that had always seemed insignificant now screamed at me with new clarity. Their laughter at jokes I didn't understand, the subtle sighs or eyes that didn't meet mine, the last Easter dinner where I remembered feeling a little out of place but had brushed it off as fatigue or my own imagination. Every memory now carried the bitter taste of neglect and betrayal. I thought about how I had once trusted them implicitly, how I had believed that love didn't require conditions. But now, staring at an unanswered text, that trust felt shattered. I curled up on the couch, the silence of my apartment pressing in around me. The familiar scent of coffee had grown faint, replaced by the metallic tang of panic that rose in my chest. Outside, neighbors laughed and played, voices carried on the breeze, oblivious to the storm inside me. I felt invisible, unimportant, abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My eyes burned from staring at the phone. hoping for even a single word, a single sign that I still mattered. But there was nothing. Nothing except the cruel clarity that they had moved on without me, leaving me alone to make sense of what had once been taken for granted. Visually, the camera pans slowly across my empty apartment. The coffee cup, still cold, the phone face down on the table, the faint light casting shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. My fingers tremble as they reach out to the phone again, hesitating, knowing that no matter what I do, I might never get the answers I need. And in that quiet, I feel the sting of rejection settle deep into my chest, heavy and inescapable. It hit me slowly at first, like a wave creeping over the shore, then all at once. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some miscommunication or a misunderstood joke. This was deliberate. The shock and confusion that had kept me suspended in a haze for days suddenly shifted into something sharper, something raw and undeniable: anger. My chest tightened, my hands clenched, and a bitter taste settled on my tongue as the truth crystallized. My parents had chosen to exclude me, to reduce our relationship to a financial transaction. Flashbacks began to pour in, unbidden and relentless. I remembered the little things I had brushed off, the subtle distances, the sighs, the conversations where they seemed distracted or disinterested. Moments that had once seemed trivial now glared at me like neon signs. The Easter where they forgot my favorite dish, the phone calls left unanswered for days, the awkward silences at family gatherings. I had been blind, or maybe I had chosen not to see, clinging desperately to the illusion of normalcy. But now, looking at that $100,000 bill, the pattern was painfully clear that I couldn't help but feel a bitter combination of disbelief and rage. How could they do this? How could they turn everything into money and obligation and ignore me at the same time? I thought about all the effort, the love, the care I had put into maintaining a connection with them, and it felt like it had been poured into a void. My mind raced with scenarios, arguments, confrontations. I was on fire with the need to make them understand the hurt they had caused, to make them see that I wasn't some invisible entity to be dismissed or exploited. Visually, the apartment feels smaller, almost oppressive. The camera lingers on my clenched fists, then pans to the cold coffee cup, untouched for hours. My eyes are fixed on the phone, the screen still showing the same cruel numbers, but now they provoke a different reaction: fury, not confusion. I imagine myself standing in their living room, confronting them, demanding answers, refusing to back down. The idea sends a shiver through me, a mix of fear and determination, but also a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt in weeks. That I finally sat down, the anger still simmering beneath the surface, and let myself feel it fully. This was no longer just pain or rejection. This was realization. The people I had loved unconditionally had betrayed me in a way that could not be ignored. And for the first time in days, amidst the churning mix of hurt and disbelief, I felt a spark of something else: the need to reclaim myself, to take back control, and to confront the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. After the initial surge of anger subsided, what settled in its place was a tense, gnawing determination. I knew I couldn't let this slide, not anymore. I needed answers, not excuses, and I needed to stand up for myself. I sat at the edge of my bed, phone in hand, imagining the conversation, rehearsing the words I would say. Each sentence I whispered aloud carried the weight of months of confusion, hurt, and disbelief. My mind oscillated between fear and resolve: fear of their reaction, fear of further rejection, but also the unmistakable drive to finally confront the truth. Flashbacks played like short, looping films in my mind. I remembered the small confrontations of my childhood, when I had learned to speak up for myself, the times I had stood my ground even against impossible odds. Those memories now felt like fuel, giving me courage I didn't realize I still possessed. I also recalled Easter mornings past, the laughter, the warmth, the family traditions, all of which now felt like fragile ghosts haunting my determination. I wanted those moments back, but I knew I couldn't chase nostalgia. I needed clarity. I began drafting messages, then erasing them, my hand trembling as I tried to strike the right balance between anger and vulnerability. I thought about what I wanted from this confrontation: not money, not apologies, but acknowledgement. I wanted them to see what their actions had done to me, to recognize the hurt, the betrayal, the silence that had eaten at me for months. At the same time, I tried to steel myself for the possibility that I might get nothing, just defensiveness, dismissal, or cold silence. Preparing for that pain became a shield, a way to protect myself emotionally before stepping into the storm. Visually, the camera lingers on my apartment bathed in soft evening light. Papers and drafts are scattered across the table, my phone screen glowing in the dim room. I pace slowly, practicing my words aloud, voice catching on emotion. The room feels alive with tension, shadows stretching long across the walls as if mirroring the anxiety coiling in my chest. Every heartbeat seems amplified, echoing in the quiet, underscoring the gravity of what is about to happen. By the time I finally set the phone down and leaned back, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and resolve. The confrontation wasn't going to be easy, and I didn't know if it would bring reconciliation or further heartbreak, but I was ready. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was reclaiming some control over a situation that had made me feel powerless for far too long. The next step was inevitable, and I was determined to face it head on, no matter how much it hurt. The moment finally came. I stood at their door, heart hammering in my chest, palms clammy, every nerve on edge. I could hear the faint hum of life inside, the clatter of dishes, muffled voices, but it felt like a world apart from the storm raging inside me. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to steady my voice, and knocked. The door opened, and for a split second, everything felt normal. But that illusion shattered instantly when our eyes met, and the tension thickened like fog in the room. That I started cautiously at first, words chosen carefully, but the dam broke quickly. "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "Why would you send me a bill for your house? Why wouldn't you just include me?" The words tumbled out faster than I could control, each syllable carrying months of hurt, confusion, and disbelief. My parents' faces shifted, surprise, defensiveness, irritation, but none of it matched the raw pain I was feeling. I tried to keep my tone calm, measured, but the anger and heartbreak seeped through anyway. Flashbacks stabbed at me as I spoke. The laughter of past Easters, the warmth of hugs now tainted by betrayal, the countless small signs I had ignored. Each memory fueled my words, gave them weight. "I trusted you," I said, my voice breaking. "I thought we had something real. And now, it feels like I was just another name on a check." Their responses were a blur, half-hearted justifications, dismissive tones, excuses that barely scratched the surface of the damage done. Each word they spoke seemed to chip away at the fragile sense of connection I'd clung to for so long. Visually, the scene tightens, close-ups of my trembling hands, the slight quiver in my lips, the way shadows fall unevenly across their faces. My breathing is sharp, echoing in the quiet room as if punctuating the confrontation itself. I pace a little, unable to stand still, trying to release the tension, the fury, the sorrow that threatened to swallow me whole. The room is small, claustrophobic, every object, books on a shelf, a photo frame, a coffee mug, somehow amplifying the emotional weight between us. By the end, the confrontation leaves a lingering emptiness. I have said what I needed to, laid my heart bare, but there is no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain inflicted. Just the cold clarity that our relationship has shifted irreversibly. I step back, exhausted, my chest aching, yet there is a strange sense of relief. I have voiced the truth I carried silently for months. And even if it changes nothing on their side, I have reclaimed a small piece of myself that had been lost. In the silence, in the exclusion, in the betrayal that I walked out of their house and into the quiet of the evening, the air cool against my skin, carrying the faint scent of rain and damp earth. The confrontation had ended, but its echoes followed me relentlessly, settling into my chest like a stone I couldn't shift. I replayed every word, every gesture, every flicker of expression, trying to understand, trying to make sense of what had happened, but there was no neat explanation. Nothing could undo the sting of being ignored, the sharp knowledge that the people I loved had reduced our connection to a dollar figure. Asterisk sharper now, almost cruel in their clarity. I remembered childhood Easters, the way my mother's hands would guide me as we dyed eggs, the smell of her baking wafting through the house, my father's laughter echoing around the kitchen. Those memories had always felt warm, safe, but now, each one carried a bitter undertone, a reminder of what had been taken from me. I realized I had been clinging to illusions, to a version of my family that no longer existed. The pain of that realization settled over me like a heavy, suffocating fog. I found myself sitting alone on a park bench, watching as life carried on around me. Children ran past, their laughter sharp against the hollow silence I felt inside. Neighbors carried baskets and flowers, celebrating the day without a thought for the emptiness I was carrying. I let the numbness take over, letting it wrap around me like a protective coat. Crying felt both impossible and inevitable at once, a strange, hollow mixture of release and continued ache. My mind spun through the confrontation again and again, searching for a place where it could have gone differently, searching for some fragment of warmth or recognition that might make sense of it all. Visually, the camera follows the slow descent of shadows as the sun dips lower, the empty streets and quiet sidewalks reflecting my inner isolation. My hands rest on my knees, trembling slightly, the chill of evening brushing against them. The phone lies forgotten in my bag, silent, indifferent, a symbol of the connection that had been severed. I close my eyes for a moment, letting the emptiness settle fully, acknowledging the hurt, the betrayal, the loss. And in that quiet reflection, a tiny seed of clarity begins to grow. That healing won't come from them. It has to come from me. After days of sitting with the numbness and replaying the confrontation in my mind, I realized something crucial. I couldn't keep allowing their choices to dictate my sense of worth. The anger, the hurt, the disbelief, they had been mine to carry alone, and it was exhausting. I needed to set boundaries, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. This wasn't about punishment. It was about reclaiming a piece of myself that had been eroded by exclusion and betrayal. I needed to define where I ended and their toxic expectations began. I spent hours thinking through what that would look like. Phone calls would be limited, visits would be at my discretion, and emotional labor, the endless striving for their approval, would no longer fall on my shoulders. Flashbacks of past interactions now served as guides rather than chains. The subtle dismissals, the small slights, the moments I had minimized to keep the peace. Each memory reinforced the necessity of creating distance, of protecting my emotional well-being. I realized that setting boundaries didn't make me cold. It made me aware of my own value. Visually, the camera captures small acts of reclamation, closing the door gently behind me, placing the phone face down on the table, picking up a book I had ignored for weeks, letting sunlight spill over the pages. I take deep, steady breaths, feeling the tension slowly leave my shoulders. The apartment feels warmer now, less oppressive, more like a sanctuary than a cage. Even mundane routines, a cup of tea, a shower, tidying up, become rituals of self-care, reminders that I am worth nurturing, worth protecting. I also lean into the support of friends and chosen family, allowing connections that feel genuine. To fill some of the void, I remind myself that love doesn't have to be transactional, that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, not fear or obligation. Each small choice, each no I say, each boundary I honor, feels like a quiet victory, a declaration that I won't be diminished by those who fail to see my worth. And in the midst of the lingering sadness, I feel a growing sense of empowerment. I may have lost their unconditional love, but I am not lost. Easter morning arrived again, but this time, the day felt different. I brewed my coffee, the familiar aroma filling the apartment, but instead of feeling lonely or hollow, there was a quiet sense of intention in the air. I had decided to celebrate on my own terms. No bills, no exclusion, no imposed expectations. I lit a small candle by the window, placed a few flowers in a vase, and allowed myself to savor the ordinary beauty of the morning. For the first time in weeks, I felt present, fully here, unburdened by the weight of their choices. Flashbacks of past Easters still flickered through my mind. The laughter, the warmth, the traditions, but now they didn't sting. They were memories, pieces of a life that had shaped me, not chains holding me to their approval. Instead, I reached out to friends who had become my chosen family, arranging a small gathering of shared meals and quiet laughter. The joy wasn't loud or performative. It was gentle, authentic, and it belonged to me. Each smile, each conversation, felt like a reclamation of the love and connection I had thought I'd lost forever. Visually, the camera captures sunlight, spilling over a simple breakfast, hands reaching for coffee mugs, laughter and conversation filling the frame. I step outside later, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, the light breeze brushing against my skin. The world feels expansive, alive, and no longer intimidating. I glance at my phone, untouched and silent, and feel no pang of longing or resentment, just calm. I am no longer waiting for acknowledgement or permission to exist fully. I am here, on my own terms, and that is enough. That I reflect quietly, realizing that closure isn't about fixing the past or receiving an apology. It's about accepting what happened, understanding its impact, and choosing a path that honors my worth. I may have lost the family I once imagined, but I haven't lost myself. I am whole, capable, and moving forward. And as I watch the sun rise higher, painting the world in gold, I allow myself a small, hopeful smile, knowing that this Easter and every day after belongs to me.